Hey, Michael,
Yes.
let's talk about men.
Oh boy, howdy.
Awooga. Okay. Um,
So I don't even think this movie's in theaters anymore, but we both
I
saw
don't
it
know.
and we
It's been a
like
long
have to
time
talk
coming.
about it.
Yeah, no. A lot of life stuff has been happening on both ends. But yeah, this is the latest from Alex Garland of Ex Machina and Annihilation fame, as well as the miniseries Devs. I've been a fan of all of his work that I've seen so far. I haven't finished Devs yet, but I'm in the middle of it. It's very good. Um,
I liked Ex Machina. I didn't really care for Annihilation.
yeah,
Uh
because of a nerd technicality that you can't fucking
that
get over.
I most like I hyped
Get
that up as
so
a
angry over a semantic issue.
look, I mostly hyped that up as a joke. Like
No, I've seen you talk about it. You get legitimately angry.
I'm
You start
annoyed by it.
shouting until spit starts flying out of your mouth. I have seen it in person. The
Hey,
spit
hey,
has
hey.
landed on me.
To be fair, time has matured me. Uh
Good.
that being said, the rest of the movie just did not really work for me as a whole.
All right.
Uh,
I love
uh,
it.
that
Even though
part,
it's
just that part
not
particularly,
the
is
best
so easy to
adaptation.
make fun of that I still make fun of it now. It's mostly as a joke. I will
Yeah.
admit I was more legitimately angry about it in my younger years, but that was also like what 6 fucking years ago. Uh,
Jesus.
like we were still in college when Annihilation came out. So,
Really?
yeah,
No, that can't be right.
I know.
I'm
I don't
gonna
know
look
if
it.
it's 6 years ago, but it was a long time ago.
I don't know. Vamp a little bit. I'm gonna look it up.
All right. So yeah, this is the latest work from. Was
I
this
already
again?
said that. Different vamp.
Okay. Well,
It
I'm
was 4 years
trying to
ago.
find.
It was 4 years ago.
Okay. Well, it feels longer.
2018.
All right. Wait. 2018 was 6 years ago. Wait, no, I'm thinking 26. I'm tired.
Bro.
God.
Math.
Look, I have a head cold. I can't think straight. That's my
Yeah. So
excuse.
just trust me with the math. Trust me with the math. Let's go with that.
All right, we'll go with that.
Um,
And now that I think about it now, yes, you are correct. It was 4 years.
so men. Um Men is a much more straightforward movie
Is it though?
than the
I
other
mean,
one.
I guess it is.
It gets a little more abstract towards the end, I think, but I think overall it's the most direct of the movies. There's not a lot of complexity to it. It's more of like a straight up. It's meant to evoke emotions directly rather than go into any kind of philosophical discussion. Because like Ex Machina was cerebral sci-fi,
Mhm.
and Annihilation was like weird sci-fi with discussion about trauma and like um the kind of people who go on missions like the mission to Mars and everything, where it's kind of a suicide mission, but
Mhm.
they just value something about that as scientists, and just people processing their trauma there too. And Devs, which is a really interesting thing about high tech and also more sci-fi. This is just straight up like creepy horror.
Yeah, but I don't think it means that it like goes out depth.
Well, no, go on, go on. Yeah.
Because it's definitely has trying to say something. I'm not entirely sure what.
So Alex Garland has specifically said that he left things in there pretty vague,
Yeah,
specifically so that people could draw their own interpretations. And he said it would say more about them than it does about the movie,
I can see that.
which I don't know if you popped onto the Twitter discourse about this movie, but he accomplished that goal.
I don't doubt
Um,
that.
so I loved this movie.
I have learned. I think this movie, like the more I've sat with it, the more I've come to appreciate it.
Yeah,
I don't think I
it
have
grows
any
on me.
intention of ever watching it again.
Well, I'm going to
Uh,
watch it again.
but I believe that.
Yeah.
I also know the other side of Internet's going to watch it for a very different reason.
Oh yeah.
Um,
But the thing about it that really, it's a very effective kind of horror movie.
mhm.
It does get under your skin with the way that it structures certain scenes. There's one scene where without giving too much, the camera is following the main character through the house while they're on a call with somebody.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I know
and
exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
there's somebody outside the house and she's not noticing them.
Yeah.
And as the scene progresses, it just gets more uncomfortable that she's not noticing because she's focused on other things. But it's not one of those things where it feels super hokey. Like, it does make sense that that's what's happening.
Yeah.
And I just really appreciated that kind of horror.
Yeah. For
It
sure.
does a good job with that. And the central gimmick of, this one dude playing every man in the movie except for her ex,
Yeah.
um, I think is a really interestingly implemented and clever mechanic.
It is. And I think to kind of bounce off of that, one thing I was talking about how to describe this movie to people because it is kind of an odd one to try to describe. And I was like, it really is more like you really have to think of it strictly on like metaphorical or like,
Oh, yeah.
like almost dream-like terms as opposed to literal terms.
Yeah, this is nightmare logic.
Yeah, because it's not maybe taken literally at any point at any given time. Because even the whole fact that all the men look the same is never addressed.
No, it's just there.
Nobody ever mentions it. The main character never seems to notice it, or if she does, she doesn't say anything.
I think she notices it because I think she notices it, but she doesn't feel like she can say anything about it because
That's
no one
entirely
else
possible.
is acting like that's the thing. It leaves that open to interpretation. I find that a fascinating thing. But overall, the way that a movie is structured and the way that the scenes are executed and the way that the horror is carried out is very effective, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And a lot of the stuff that I see of people not liking the movie, surprisingly, hasn't even been about the more interesting elements that come in the third act.
Yeah.
It's been more about it's been more about what this movie is trying to say about men, and in terms of how it affects different people and how they see it. One of the main criticisms I've seen of this is, hilariously and tellingly, the same kind of reductive approach that a lot of people have taken towards The Last of Us Part 2. One of the main criticisms that I heard from people who liked to basically ignore all of the complexities of the game was just to say that all the game has to say is revenge bad.
Which is
that's so reductive.
Absolutely.
It is one of the most complex explorations of revenge and pain and trauma that I've ever seen in a storytelling medium.
And inherited generational violence too.
Yeah, it's such an incredible story. And I know that a bunch of people probably turn this off just hearing me say that. They're like, these guys,
how dare you?
Fuck these people. But the thing with men is that I've seen it just reduced to the core message of the movie just being men bad.
Which I don't think is necessarily what it's trying to say.
I don't think so either. But I think the interesting thing about all of the men looking alike is just saying that they are so similar. Like the way that if we take that same face and take it as representative of misogyny and the kind of passive violence that is visited upon women, what the movie does to make you uncomfortable throughout the course of the movie is there are a couple of other women in the movie that show up for like momentarily, but generally it's just these men and her interactions with these men throughout the whole thing. Like, not all of them are trying to, dismiss her or gaslight her or anything. Like, especially the host, he very earnestly wants to be a good host. He's just really awkward and weird. But he, like, there's so many different ways that misogyny plays out. And this movie really does a good job of making that the horror of the movie, of like, nobody believes you, and even if they saw it themselves, they dismiss it as not that big a deal and act like you're just freaking out for no reason and like you're crazy and that you just need to calm down and you're being emotional, when you have been in her shoes this whole time and you have seen this progress and you know that what she's talking about is seriously not something to just be brushed off. And all these different interactions that she has throughout the movie, like, the conversation she has with the priest.
Yeah.
Just these weird things where it feels like she's being made to feel like she's crazy when she's clearly not. And I don't know, I really liked how this movie used that mechanism as it's because it's not an uncommon theme in horror movies for someone to be trying to tell people something that's going on and nobody believes them.
Yeah.
And for them to translate that into just the way that a lot of women are treated, just standard misogyny, I think is really clever.
Yeah.
And that's really the central conceit of it. If you're a guy who watches this movie and all you see is men bad, you are literally looking at all of these different things that happen in the movie, all these different forms of misogyny, all the different things that she is subjected to and is trying to fight through to be believed and seen and be safe. If you just see all of those as just the same thing, that kind of says something about how you treat women.
Yeah.
And how you treat like that kind of emotional invalidation. It's really interesting.
It is. And I think I saw someone like point this out. It was actually a very good point about the whole like, oh, not all men kind of crap that automatic defense mechanism like guys throw out there whenever they feel mildly threatened by something. Is that, you know, at the end of the day, if you're looking at all those things, all these guys and all these like all men do this and they don't apply to you, it's not about you.
Yeah.
But like in a broader scope, oh crap, I had a larger point here and I lost it. I'm trying to get it back.
I'm sorry.
But I think it does have a lot to say about misogyny, but I'm also wondering how much it also relates to trauma involving men and how after you experience trauma involving men, that after a while it's hard to separate like men as individuals or whatever the case may be, is or the good men from the bad men, whoever the case may be. Because I do want to. All you see is just like men that have caused this pain and continue to do so because the system doesn't hold them accountable.
Yeah, or the men don't hold each other accountable.
Yes.
And I do want to dig into that a little more when we get into spoilers, but the thing that's difficult to talk about without spoiling anything is the third act. And all I want to say about that is that the way that it's all brought around is like the third act of this movie goes off the fucking rails. It goes from just being this creepy thing to this outright horrifying experience.
Yeah.
And some of the most graphic and bizarre and uncomfortable imagery I have ever seen in a movie. And I'm into this kind of shit. So like, you got to take my word on that. But the way that it all comes around by the very end of it, the final line in the movie is, some people may think it's may be reductive about it, but for me personally, I like to think that I've grown a lot as a person, and I know that I have. We always have room to grow, but that final line of the movie hit me in a way where I was like, oh fuck.
Yeah.
I've done this. I've done this quite a bit when I was younger. And potentially even more recently, like it made me think about some things. And I'm honestly still thinking about that. It has given me, this movie gave me this framework that just really honestly is something that made me a little more self-aware of how certain things translate from intent and action and how these things work. So, I mean, what more can you ask for in terms of an experience from a movie? If it affects you that deeply, if it connects that deeply with your experiences and really flips you on your head in the last few seconds, like that's an impressive feat. I have to give this movie props. Like the whole movie up to that point was pretty great, but that moment at the end was fucking fantastic. One thing I like to say about this movie is it's the best Silent Hill experience I've had in like 15 years.
Yeah, right.
It's basically a Silent Hill movie.
Pretty much is. Yeah.
And that's the interesting thing about it, because like if you understand what makes Silent Hill really good, it's not just the cool monsters and stuff as a normal survival horror. The classic survival Silent Hill survival horror experience is centered around the psychological component and the fact that the main character in Silent Hill is stuck in sort of their own personal hell. The energy of Silent Hill is building off of something within them. That's why in the first 4 games, which is from the original team, all of the monsters in all of the games were different because they were all based on the main characters of each game. You never see Pyramid Head in like anything but Silent Hill 2, because Pyramid Head is directly related to James's psychological demons and trauma. And they bring Pyramid Head back in one of the later games because he's cool and people want to see him, and they don't want to work on making something actually, interesting and new.
Yeah.
But this feels very much like that kind of experience where she's just in this weird, surreal, personal hell.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. And like one of my favorite things about Silent Hill is when the characters run into other characters that seem to know something about them, and they don't have enough time to explore that conversation, and they're just kind of like strung along into these weird, surreal discussions that don't really make sense, but they don't know how to push them back towards reason. And this movie has that. Like, it has the psychological components of Silent Hill. I fucking love that.
I would be very curious to see a Silent Hill movie directed by this guy.
Oh God, I actually said that in my Letterboxd review. I'm like, please, Alex Garden, just direct an actual Silent Hill movie, please. Like, I would kill to see that.
Yeah, I think just to kind of piggyback off some of that, I think like as someone who identifies as a man, it is definitely a case where I'm extremely self-conscious of how I like approach and talk to women, because I know for a fact, especially in my teenage years when I had no idea what the fuck I was doing, I have absolutely made poor women uncomfortable.
Yeah,
and that's not something I'm proud of, and God knows it's like that's not even say I don't do it now unintentionally, but I like that it still does what I mean to or not.
Yeah.
And that's something I feel like as just like people who identify as my gender need to own more and do something about. So even not necessarily even when it's more metaphysical as opposed to literal, anything that can kind of start questioning that logic, that kind of framing, like what that actually means and how that affects people. I do see is very important.
Yeah.
So in that regard, yeah, like this movie has definitely garnered more favor with me the more time I've had to sit back. I kind of need to sit with it because you really have to work through some of that third act imagery.
Yeah, you definitely there's a thing where like you're going to need some time to get over the experience of watching the movie to be able to think about it more clearly.
Because I remember you, me, and Chris were like in a text chain like as I was going to see this movie. And like towards the end, I think I just sent like just a gif of just Jack Nicholson like,
yeah,
which is basically
like, oh God, I was staring at the screen in slack-jawed horror for most third act, like literally just.
And it was like me and like one other guy in the theaters who was also a loner. I almost wanted
you just looked over and been like, dude, what the fuck?
I almost did, honestly. Like, I didn't want to bother his.
Did you catch any of his facial reactions?
He was in front of me, so I couldn't really see what he was doing. It was just too bad. But at the same time, I was like, I want to look. I was like, you saw that too, right?
Yeah, right.
I didn't picture that.
But no, I was seriously just having this, and that's another thing. Like the level of body horror was so impressive. It's some of the best I've ever seen, and I'm a Cronenberg fan. Like, I've been seeing body horror for a very long time in all kinds of iterations. This was phenomenal. I
mean, I saw the latest Cronenberg movie, and I can say the gore here is better.
So
that's another movie I still need to sit with, even though it's been like a week since I've seen it.
Yeah, I still need to catch it. But yeah, no, I think this movie has a lot to say. I think it has a lot of valuable stuff to say, and I think that it's worth seeing for anybody who can stomach it.
even if you can't, like honestly, like this is one of those cases, like, you know what? Make yourself a little uncomfortable because you kind of have to.
Men should see it. Well, I think that the problem is that, especially with like the fact that a lot of the imagery in the more uncomfortable section is like more symbolic.
That's true.
And it is directly calling back to certain like mythological imagery that has direct meaning to the implications of the movie. But if you don't know any of that stuff, and if you're uncomfortable with that kind of imagery, you're just going to be like, why is this happening again? Like, it just happened. Why is it happening again? Like, it's uncomfortable. But if you know the religious or the mythological iconography that it's referring to, it's actually really interesting.
You have to explain it to me because I only know like a little bit about it.
God, I have to look. I forgot the actual names of the stuff. But I know there's a reason that the Green Man is referenced. There is an actual like entity called the Green Man in pagan mythology, which symbolizes certain elements of like, well, not to get into that yet, but
spoilers. I feel like we've gone as far as we can go.
Well, okay, you guys can tell what we're into. We like this. It's good. Spoiler time. Time. Woo. All right.
So
the Green Man is directly a symbol of rebirth.
I kind of thought it was something like that.
But also it is a symbol of not necessarily rebirth in the sense of actually giving birth to a new form of yourself, like not rebirth in the sense that we think, but kind of rebirth in the sense that it carries on yourself. So it is what happens at that part of the movie is a direct reference to the idea that men are chasing the idea of being reborn, but they can't escape from the things that make them what they are. They can't escape from the things that make them abusive and shitty in the way that they are, simply because they don't know how to undo that. They don't have the tools they need to undo that. So they are just the way they are. And then when they give birth to the next generation, that generation is the exact same. They're still dealing with the same things. It doesn't get any better.
Mm-hmm.
And
until you produce something like her ex-boyfriend in the movie, who is just, an abusive monster.
Dude, I really appreciated how I caught on that they were doing this relatively early, but I really appreciated how with the imagery of his corpse, when she finds his body,
create that slowly but surely.
Yeah, I really appreciate, dude, the thing with the knife in the arm.
Fuck, dude.
I was like,
no, I was the same way. And then they keep bringing it back, and it's like the fingers of both sides are moving.
Dude,
like, oh god, I forgot about the choking.
Oh god, it's such incredible imagery. It's the arm getting split down the middle and then being used to pin her against a wall. Like the split hand with the fucking wound just around her neck. And the whole idea that all of these men are treating her like this, and the core motivation underneath it is that they want her. They want to be close to her, or they're upset that they can't have her. And that this is their way of getting that, because they're angry and they have no care for her as an autonomous human being. That's
her fault for not wanting them, as opposed to the other way.
Exactly. And that frustration, how that translates into that kind of abuse, like it's there have been relationships in my past where I have not gotten the affection I needed, so I got angry and got abusive in return. And granted, like, they were abusive back, we broken ass fucking kids, but like the sheer reflection of that, and just thinking about the logic of that, having it portrayed in such an extreme way, such a harrowing, terrifying way, and then having it brought back around to that and being like, oh fuck.
And how it deals with just the public image around just masculinity in general, because when a woman rejects a man, it's seen as emasculating, it's seen as being less than. So that's what, like, on society, like at least on a cultural level, like it turns on that whole you rejected me, you're making me less of a man. Now, granted, that's not universal.
Well, but the interesting thing about that too is the fact that, you know, and this is something that I've actively thought about a lot as I've unlearned a lot of those things. But the idea of, for example, rating people on a scale of 1 to 10,
Yeah.
instead of it, like there's an objective hotness scale, and the only thing that matters is physical hotness. Instead of thinking about the fact that this is a complex person, there are a lot of different people that look a lot of different ways, that are hot in different ways, and personality is a big factor on how hot a person is. And the way that you can factor all these things together and have this whole like spectrum of a universe of hotness, and reducing that to the idea of a 1 to 10 scale. If a guy is rejected by a woman, it means that he thought he could get someone at that number because he thought that he is a certain number. And the fact that he can't makes him feel like he's lesser on the scale, which is more threatening to him in a completely different way, when maybe you're just not her type, dude.
Yep.
Maybe you're just not compatible. Maybe she likes a totally different type of person. There's nothing wrong with that.
No.
It's like, and the idea that you're objectively hot, like maybe you're a good looking person, but maybe she's looking for something else, like other than just, you know, physical attraction. Maybe she's not there for a meat market, you know, like it's this, there's so much more complexity to that is so much more forgiving. It's so much better if you just accept it. And as long as they're not fucking assholes about it, like there's no reason to get mad or hurt about it. It's just like, all right, maybe she's in a bad mood. Maybe she's had a bad day. Maybe she just wants to drink her beer in peace because she just wanted to go to a bar and not be stuck at home and drink a beer. And like, maybe she just wants to be left alone. That's valid, dude. Like, what if some random dude came over to your group of friends and started talking to you, like out of the blue, interrupting what you were doing when you wanted to be left alone? Like, you just be like, fuck off. There's so many reasons why someone would not want to talk to you as a person. And the idea of rejection being taken so personally as like a judgment of your value as a human being is such a, it's like, it feeds back into the whole toxic mindset that things are yours to have and take, and you have to conquer the world around you to do so.
Yeah.
And there's this whole, you know, complex tapestry of misogyny that's built around that. But that's the whole thing around toxic masculinity. You know, it's not all masculinity is toxic. No. And there are people who hear toxic masculinity and just think they're referring to masculinity as a toxic thing, but that's not the truth.
No,
it's certain forms of masculinity and things that are exclusive to masculinity, born from these kinds of mindsets of needing to conquer and take and not accepting no as an answer.
It's like when the masculinity produces entitlement.
Yes.
And produces
dehumanization.
Dehumanization that produces this the alpha male mentality of I am superior.
Yes.
In some way, and I deserve these things. I'm entitled to these things. Unfortunately, it's things often mean women, because that same form of masculinity also means they devalue them as people.
Yes. Well, there's also, you can have an alpha male mentality that's not toxic still. It's possible, because that is, you could just say that's a leader. That's someone who can serve an example and help be a leader of other men. And that's totally valid. It's fine to have that as an aspiration. But when alpha male in someone's mindset means that they just dominate everything around them and get everything they want, that's toxic. Absolutely. So the way that this movie translates this into all of these different forms of aggression that she experiences is just such a fascinating concept for a movie. And weirdly, you might hate this, but weirdly, in a way, the other movie that it reminds me of, the only other movie that's done anything close to this in my mind, is Mother.
Okay.
Because I
didn't like Mother, but I get where you're coming from.
Yeah, it squarely puts you in the perspective of the woman. And the horror of the movie is essentially the gaslighting and negligence and abuse of this woman at the hands of men or a man. And it just is no big deal to that person, and they think that they're acting just fine. But the moment that she pushes back against it, they get angry. And that escalates into this like crazy fucking third act, of course, with some pretty nightmarish imagery. and weirdly also directed by men. So like in weird ways, and I really hope Alex Garland is not as toxic as Darren Aronofsky turns out to be.
Oh man.
But yeah, he did not have a healthy relationship with Jennifer Lawrence.
You can imagine why.
But yeah, I really like that they kind of pair well together in that way.
Mm-hmm. I can see that.
I understand that it can be really triggering for some people, but I really appreciate the concept of turning these things into horror mechanisms. And they both did it really well. They executed it well. So yeah, whether or not you like it, it was executed well.
For sure. Yeah. So I feel like we kind of already touched on the fact, but I think we just have to talk to, at some extent, talk about the multiple birth scene.
Why? I feel like it's pretty straightforward. It does use ancient pagan iconography. Aside from the Green Man, the image where he goes on his back and he spreads his legs and like holds his legs like that, that is a direct reference to ancient fertility statues.
Mm-hmm.
That's an actual thing. And the idea of the birth and the rebirth is kind of just, in my mind, just a straight up metaphor for the fact that these are all just generations of the same men. It's deepening the idea that it is evolving, it is being passed down, but ultimately they still have the same wounds that the previous, they don't get fixed. They still have that split hand and everything. They still have that same aggression. They still have that confusion and that pain. And like when the kid comes out and he screams, and when it starts, like they start being birthed out of other parts of the body, the variations happen and it's all confusing, but ultimately it doesn't change anything. It's still the same monster and it's not getting any better.
Okay.
I mean, do you feel like there's anything else to say about that?
I think you covered it pretty thoroughly. We can move on.
Yeah. So like, and I really appreciate how the nightmare logic comes into play during that house sequence, because that whole, like, you don't know which direction shit is coming from.
But I do just have to
darkness.
Give respect of just like, if you're going to go that direction, like just fucking go for it. And yeah, he does.
And they did it. And the whole thing with like the light going out in the yard.
Oh,
and, like,
yep.
People disappearing and reappearing, and just, that was really well executed. That's some fucking, like, that's some classic horror shit.
Yep.
He did it really well. It was so good. When the housekeeper, when the landlord.
Oh yeah.
Like when he's there and he's reassuring her, and like, you are finally getting like, oh, maybe this is over. Mm-hmm. And then he just disappears.
Yep.
And then the other guy reappears like much closer to her, and you're like, oh fuck. Just, it's so good.
So you really just have to admire a filmmaker who is like, you know what if it came out of his back?
Yeah. It's the Spinozzi for me. It's the like
or like, what if we just split his hand in half right down the middle and just kept it there for like 20 minutes?
Yeah.
Still had it. What if he chokes her with it? You know,
yeah.
Like that, where like, if you're just gonna go for it, I respect anyone that just like, nah, we're gonna do 110.
Yeah, it was so impressive. I loved it.
Whether you like are just grossed out by it or whatever feelings it brings out, and you just have to respect the fact that they fucking did it.
Yeah.
In a very uncompromised way.
Yeah. This is a vision.
Yeah.
This is definitely a vision brought to life intact. And I love that they're still giving Alex Garland like full reign and control over whatever the fuck he wants to do, because he was clearly not reined in on this movie.
No.
And
like, I would love to be a fly in the wall in that producer meeting, though.
Oh God, yeah.
Can you imagine being there?
Imagine like storyboarding that third act for people like, all right, stay with me now.
You want to know what?
Wait, what?
How many times?
Out of his mouth? Feet first? Well, I guess birth, sure, but feet first out of the mouth? Yeah, dude, just good shit. Oh my God. So creative, so interesting, such a fascinating implementation of this concept. And I honestly, I think as I think about it more, this might make it onto my best of the year list.
It might for me. I don't know is
It
the
might.
honest answer right now.
Just for the fact that it did something so unique so well.
Yeah, that's fair. That's very true.
And worthwhile. I do think this movie is worthwhile as something
Absolutely.
to think about with the messaging. Although generally, the people who are going to appreciate it the most are, preaching to the choir. But even, you and me both, I like to think that we're both kind of on the better side of this fucking journey.
We're at the very least, we're trying to be.
Yes, we are aware enough of it, but at the same time, we were still given something to think about as far as our own pasts.
I mean, that's part of the growth too, is recognizing those effects on you and learning why they're bad and why they have to be discarded or at least evolved from.
Yeah.
And otherwise,
sorry.
Because like going back to like the whole generational rebirth and just carrying the past with you, it's like it only ends when one person decides to put the work in.
And the way that this movie kind of holds up that Black Mirror is really, really effective. I didn't expect it to hit me personally at the end,
By the way, just on a literal standpoint, she totally kills him at the end, right? That little post-credit stinger.
There's a post-credit stinger?
You didn't see that?
I didn't stay to the very. Oh fuck! Well, now I have to watch it again.
Well, it's not too long to the credits. Like in the first, it's like less than like 3 minutes into the credits when you get.
Where she's just sitting on the.
Yeah, when she's in the stoop, covered in blood with a knife. Yeah.
I mean, she's been covered with blood, and she's had the knife.
Well, it's more like at the end of the movie when she's in the couch with her reborn.
No, I know. I don't
she's
know
kind of holding the knife like,
I don't know that she killed him. I think that she just left him there in his suffering because he's not her responsibility.
Maybe.
So, yeah. Oh man, but the whole abusive boyfriend thing was, yeah.
That one's loaded.
Yeah, reminded me of some shit I've been through.
Not gonna say I've been through anything that extreme, but I know people who have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
it's accurate. Yeah. I'll say that much for sure.
It's a movie about some tough topics, and it handles it all very well.
Yeah,
it doesn't waste that. I don't like movies that just use them for exploitation. This movie digs, and it does
absolutely.
Great. So, yeah. That's all I really have to say. I think.
I think we're good.
Good conversation.
So Jurassic Park.
Have you seen it yet?
Not yet. I still got to get somebody to go see it.
I've already seen it. Yeah, I'm happy to review it with you.
Wait, the newest one?
Yes.
Really? I would not have thought you would go on your way to go see that. But
it's a dumb fuck movie. But as long as you embrace it being a dumb fuck movie, you'll be fine.
All right.
There are people comparing it to Rise of Skywalker, which I think is really overdoing it. It is not that bad. I would say it's more like The Force Awakens.
Okay.
But more fun.
I like The Force Awakens. Okay.
I just think it's aggressively bland, and the action sequences aren't as fun as they think they are. I think it's a solid 6, maybe 6.5 out of 10.
I give it a solid 7, but yeah, like
I would say Jurassic Park and Jurassic World Dominion is like a solid 8 just for the enjoyment factor of the action sequences alone. The standout sequence happens in like it's in a place where there is a underground like black market for dinosaurs.
Okay. And I'll make time to go see it tomorrow.
There's a motorcycle chase involved, and all I can say is that while I was watching that part, I was like, "Fuck, this dude should have directed Uncharted." Like the action sequences made me wish that this guy had done the Uncharted movie.
Damn. All right, well, I'll make time to go watch it tomorrow.
Yeah,
I think it's 2.5 fucking hours long. Jesus. Okay.
It's not doesn't feel that bad. It doesn't feel that bad.
All right, I'll
see it in IMAX if you can. It's worth it.
Okay.
I saw it in IMAX 3D. It was a blast.
I will give it a shot. We'll see how it goes.
All right, man.
I think that's all we got for this one. Thank you all for watching. See you later.